I wish everyone a pleasant story. Princess, that celestial maiden, even if she has the ability to reach the immortal realm, is of poor origin. How dare she keep you waiting? Shut up. Princess Cheng's consort sat under the observatory, elegantly frowning, but her eyes couldn't help but glance up at the platform, revealing her anxiety and unease. The national teacher said the celestial maiden is a golden star that has passed down the world. Her eyes can see through people's fates of life and death, and can predict their fortunes. What do you understand? The maid beside her did not dare to speak again. After another half-stick of incense, I stepped down from the platform. After writing down each astronomical phenomenon today, and giving the celestial maiden some incense, I sat down opposite Suji. Suji is not yet 30, fortunately she is beautiful, can be said to be extremely beautiful, just that her face is full of worries. The princess's thoughts are urgent but not urgent. Suji looked at the maid a little surprised. Does the goddess know what I want to ask? Is it about children? Everyone knows that the prince and princess respect each other like guests, extremely affectionate. In the mansion there is no other connecting room. Unfortunately, after 7 years of marriage, there was still no heir. The Queen Mother and His Majesty often asked about it. Yesterday, during the Mid-Autumn Festival, His Majesty even said after drinking that he wanted to reward Prince Chong with several beautiful concubines to continue the family line. This made Suji feel like she was facing a great enemy, so she came to me, the celestial maiden Su Fei. What if she was destined to have no heir? Not only can I read her fortune, I can also change her fortune. You see, what should I do? I am extremely urgent. In the southeast of the capital, find a woman born in the same year, month and day as you. She has a very ugly red mole, and will have many children and good fortune. He found a way to bring her back to his side. After saying that, I took the pen, dipped it in vinegar, bit my fingertip, mixed it with the vinegar, wrote 2 talismans and put them in a brocade bag. He and she each wore one of these 2 brocade bags. I will give you another medicine, you take it once a day. After 49 days you can change the fate of your descendants. Suji heard this and his expression was excited. He shook his hands to receive the talisman. She glanced at the servant and the servant quickly brought up a box. A golden box filled with gold. I smiled. Your Highness is too polite. No one else will know that your Highness is here today. She nodded. A trace of disdain flashed across the corner of her mouth. What about celestial women? Aren't they still greedy for gold and silver? I know she thinks so. After I put away the gold, the goddess Tram Hung returned. She glanced at the vow that she had left behind and said, "Hey, whose vow is this? What a good fate." I looked at the other vow again and said with interest, "Really? I see, this is a fate of misfortune." Tram Hung studied it carefully for a while, but couldn't see anything, so she turned to take care of the orchids I was raising. How strange, a few days ago this orchid was almost dead, but after she took care of it for 2 days it came back to life. Sister 2 is truly a divine being. I just smiled and said nothing. The high-ranking officials all hoped that this world would have the protection of the gods, but they did not know that the person they considered a descendant of a god 8 years ago was an ant under their feet. I was able to save this dying orchid pot, not a miracle, but because I had a father who was proficient in taking care of flowers and plants. My father loved flowers and plants extremely. Even the most difficult flowers to grow could grow well in his hands. He rented a flower garden on the outskirts of the capital, and usually grew flowers and grass, supplying them to the wealthy families in the capital. Some people who heard of my father's ability brought pots of rare and sick flowers to my father for treatment. Each of us set up a flower garden stall, selling dried flower tea. The 4 of us made a living by growing and selling flowers. Although we weren't rich, we had food and clothing. Until one day someone brought a large order. The daughter of the Minister of Revenue promised to ask my father to deliver several pots of expensive orchids to the Chang Palace. At that time, I was sitting under a tree weaving flower baskets and heard the maids of the family chatting in the flower garden. Knowing that His Majesty had bestowed a marriage on Prince Chang, the future princess was Suji. But Prince Chang was used to a life of freedom and did not want to get married, and naturally did not like this future princess. Suji tried every means to please him, especially asking about Prince Chang's preferences, either wearing the color of clothes he liked, or learning the folk dance of the 6 demons he loved the most. A few days ago, I heard that King Ton likes orchids, so he came to my house. But the problem is, King Ton absolutely hates Suji's flattery. This is a marriage granted by the king. He can't show any dissatisfaction on his face, so he can only vent his anger on the servant. Anyone who promised to come to the palace, be it a delivery person or an invitation, would be beaten up and chased out by him. At least their faces would be bruised. At worst their arms and legs would be broken. I was afraid that my father would meet the same fate, so I hurriedly went to the flower garden to look for him. But after hearing this, my father pondered for a moment, then patted my hand to comfort me, saying it was okay. My father ran very fast. If that king really hit me, I wouldn't need the reward and would just turn around and run away. I still felt uneasy, and at night I couldn't sleep, so I decided to go and persuade my father. I heard my parents talking in front of the door. Mother was also advising father not to accept this order. But father said the promised bonus was not small. I was getting older, I needed to get married, and a dowry had to be prepared for me. I really wanted to say that I would not marry, but I knew father's temperament. Once he decided on something, he would definitely do it. So the day my father went to the palace to deliver flowers, I secretly followed. I thought that if I heard someone beating my father, I would rush in and risk my life. I sat at the back door and waited until my father happily came out. He saw me stunned and didn't have time to ask why I was here, but took out a paper package from his bosom, and before he could open it, he smelled the sweet scent of cake. Sawney, look, your father is still very lucky. Not only did the king not beat me, he also rewarded me with cake. This kind of cake is very precious. We may not have the chance to eat it in our entire lives. Just in time, your mother gets a piece, you get a piece, and you get a piece. I looked at it and drooled. My father told me to go home with him. I suddenly remembered that the flower basket I was selling was still at the market, so I told him to go home first. I went back to get the basket, but unexpectedly I came across an important criminal who was being arrested by a local agent. The whole market was turned upside down. I held the crushed basket and followed the vegetable seller to find the agent who was being held for justice. I didn't return until it was dark. Thinking about how my father had left me some cake, I unconsciously quickened my pace. Just 100 meters away from home, I saw flames rising from that direction. A buzzing sound rang out, and my mind went blank. My whole body stiff and cold, I ran home in a panic. The lush green garden had turned into a sea of fire. The bodies of my mother and younger brother lay in the sea of fire. The concubine was trampled underfoot by a man in black, her whole body covered in knife wounds. They said with disdain, a lowly commoner would dare to eat the cakes personally made by the princess. It was not a pity. The maid next door, who had come to my house a few days ago to laugh and praise the beautiful flowers my father planted, now covered her nose with a disgusted expression. Hurry up, we still have to buy silk for the young lady. That person raised his sword, and with one stroke he cut off my father's head and threw it into the sea of fire. My eyes split open. I wanted to rush forward, but was held back by that person. If you rush forward now, you are courting death. That person is wearing a prison uniform and is the important prisoner that the agency wants to capture. He controlled me this afternoon and pretended to be my brother before escaping. At this moment he covered my mouth tightly, and said to my side, this person never owed anyone any favors. Do you want revenge? Then follow me. I was dragged away by him, and that sea of fire was getting further and further away from me. But I know that day I died with my parents in that sea of fire. Knowing that he promised to come find me during the day, the national teacher rushed to my place at night. After I chased Tran Hung away, he immediately questioned me. What nonsense did you say to the prince? Do you really consider yourself a celestial maiden? There is no celestial maiden. It is just a trick set up by the Imperial Astronomical Inspector to manipulate power. They came up with a perfect plan, with strange signs in the sky and the late emperor appearing, saying that in the south there were immortals and celestial maidens. The emperor was delighted and ordered the people from the Imperial Astronomical Observatory to go look for them. They pretended to be gods and ghosts, following their plan to find a liar. But unexpectedly, the original goddess and her lover ran away on the road. When the national teacher was in deep sorrow and didn't know what to do, I appeared, my clothes torn, begging them to give me a meal. They lifted my messy hair and looked at me, noticing that my features were beautiful and my age was similar to that of the celestial maiden. So they hurriedly stuffed me into the palanquin, pretended that nothing had happened, and took me straight back to the capital. They thought it was a blessing from heaven, but they did not know that I had been following them from beginning to end. The news about the whereabouts of that celestial maiden was also secretly reported to my lover. The national master only ordered me to obediently follow their arrangements. The fact that I secretly met with the Princess of Tan scared him to the point of being afraid that I would reveal the matter. I kept quiet and gave half of the gold in the box to the national teacher. Don't worry, I've been tricked by you and will be forced to obey. I definitely won't cause any trouble. Those nobles have a lot of money and are easy to fool. Wouldn't it be better if we just freely earned some money? Seeing the gold, the national teacher's face softened a lot. But immediately after, he frowned again. Princess Chang was not someone who could be easily fooled. I leisurely took a sip of tea. Of course, I could really help her get pregnant. I gave her a prescription passed down from my hometown. Drink it for 49 days and it will be effective. The national teacher's eyes lit up. Is that true? I bowed my head slightly. Of course it was fake. I said, making such a promise is a cruel fate and will lead to no descendants. Just 49 days is enough for me to take revenge. A few days passed. I guessed that Su Qi had found that woman. I went to the biggest clothing store in the capital, just in time for Su Qi to choose fabric. The palace guards surrounded the shop, not allowing outsiders to enter. As soon as she saw me, Hua Qi hurriedly and warmly approached, calling Miss Tu. She glanced at the servants and signaled them to leave, then leaned close to my ear and whispered, I have found the person my aunt told me about, and as she said, I bring her along with me every day. I followed her gaze and saw that beside Xian Dao, the royal confidant of Hua Qi, was a young lady with an elegant and otherworldly appearance. Even though she was only wearing royal clothes, she still stood out in the crowd. I smiled, then I will congratulate the princess first. Remember to take good care of her. This person's appearance is kind and generous. That's only natural. Su was polite and wanted to give me some silk. While I was choosing clothes, Xian Dao said in dissatisfaction beside Su Qi, Princess, this concubine has such a charming appearance. If she has any thoughts seducing the prince, wouldn't that be inviting trouble into the house? According to this servant, it would be better to destroy her appearance to avoid future trouble. Her beautiful face was full of jealousy and flattery. I suddenly remembered that year, she was also standing in my yard, disgusted by my father's blood staining her clothes, then conveniently kicked my father's head like a ball into the fire. Hua Qi frowned. The goddess said to take good care of him. She said half of her sentence, turned around and saw me looking at Xian Dao and smiling. A little confused, I asked, what are you looking at? I see that this lady has a kind appearance. Really? Xian Dao's face relaxed. I said casually, she is plump, has a round chin, and can marry into a noble family in the future, but unfortunately she is not destined to be the main wife if there is a chance. I glanced at the promise, then hesitated. I misspoke. Princess, don't take it to heart. Just now, Xian Dao was secretly happy, but after hearing what I said, her face turned pale. She covered her mouth and said, Wang Fei, this servant absolutely did not mean it. Su Ji sneered. I was wondering why you were glaring at that concubine more than me. It turns out she was blocking your path. How unjust, Wang Fei. Xian Dao knelt down and hugged Su Ji's leg, but was kicked away by her. Don't make a laughing stock of yourself in front of the commoners outside. When we get back to the palace, I will settle the score with you. The next day, people saw a dead body being carried out from the back door of the prince's mansion. She was wrapped in a straw mat and thrown onto the ground. The maid who had served Su Ji for more than 10 years was replaced by a beautiful maid. At this moment, that beautiful woman was sitting across from me, and the king suddenly changed the type of incense he was using. He was someone who was right next to me, so of course he would notice. At that moment, she smelled the same scent as the one on the spring peach blossom. The seeds of suspicion had already sprouted, coupled with what she said the other day. With Hua Qi's jealous nature, how could I forgive her? I smiled. You do your work very well, thank you. Tan Lu poured me a cup of tea. Having a common enemy is what makes us friends. After leaving the capital, I followed my master to study, and was never in danger of being exterminated. Every 2 years, I returned to the capital once to check on the political situation and the royal palace. I met Tan Lu 2 years ago. The king and Hua Qi went on a trip to the lake. Tan Lu hit her knife on the path they would definitely pass. Once she rushed out, there would be only death. I stopped her hand just like my master saved me years ago, giving her another way to live. Tan Lu was a famous courtesan in the Tainai court, but because of her beautiful appearance, she was noticed by Tan Vong. He often went to the court to approach her, wanting to marry her as a concubine. Tan Lu could not stand the harassment, so she had to quit her job to escape. Unexpectedly, she avoided the man who flirted with her, but could not escape the jealous and envious woman. Su Ji knew about Qin Jiejie, and his jealousy flared up. When Qin Jiejie took her things and left, he sent someone to capture her, humiliating her innocence. He also stripped her of her family's reputation, and spread rumors that she was having an affair. Su Ji wanted to warn Chang Wang that no matter which girl he liked in the future, she would still be loyal to her fate. Chang Wang said something that was frivolous because she seduced me. Put all the blame on the innocent woman. Then he spoke sweet words to seduce Hua Qi, and the two became a loving couple again. I, more than anyone, understand Qin Lu's immense hatred. Then let's try it. Let's see if these lowly ants can bite the heads of the nobles. Xian Dao is just the beginning, the next one is me. I looked down at the tea house. A rich and chubby child was crying for a candied fruit, and Hua Qi, as the princess of Chang, was sitting there coaxing him. Because Hua Qi was absorbed in the child, Tan Lu had a little time to talk to me. That was the sixth prince that the emperor loved the most. The empress dowager said that having children in the palace was a blessing, so she sent the little prince to the Changwang palace to play for a few days. Su Ji played with him every day for the past few days. Tan Lu and I watched, our eyes cold and full of hatred. She raised her lips, the fun had begun. Outside, the sixth prince was still crying, demanding to eat candied fruit. Hua Ji was afraid that the street food was unsafe, so he did not give it to him. The sixth prince immediately pointed at the candy seller. His face was grim. If you do not give it to me, I will kill you. The vendor was so scared that he could only kowtow and beg for mercy. At this moment the situation changed. The healthy sixth prince suddenly turned red in the face, holding his throat and gasping for breath, his skin covered with red rashes. Su Ji was speechless, his face pale. Sixth prince. The servants were in an uproar. The sixth prince was the emperor's youngest son and had been pampered since childhood. When he was born, his mother was made a concubine from a small beauty, and when he was 1 year old he was made a king. This was an unprecedented privilege. If anything happened to him, the consequences would be unimaginable. Hua Ji sat beside the sixth prince in confusion, completely helpless. Quickly dispersed, Qin Lu rushed forward, pushed the crowd aside, then used a wet towel to cover his nose and mouth. The imperial guards arrived very quickly. The entire maternity hospital was in chaos. Unfortunately, the sixth prince's illness was too severe. In just a moment he was red as if boiled. His eyes were wide open from suffocation, looking very terrifying. The emperor was furious. The Qingwang and Su Ji stood outside the palace, holding their breaths and praying. At this time, the chief eunuch beside the emperor accidentally mentioned me. Isn't the celestial maiden a fairy descending to earth, saving people? Or? The emperor thought about it, and immediately ordered me to be summoned. The national teacher was so scared that his legs went limp. He knew that I was just a beggar. How could I have any magical powers? I replied leisurely, I must go to the celestial observatory to be saved. The sixth prince was quickly brought there, and a large crowd of people came. The emperor himself came and waited outside my room. After a stick of incense, I opened the door and bowed my head. The sixth prince was fine. The imperial physician came in to check. The sixth prince was already fast asleep as usual. They were afraid of making a mistake, so they took turns taking his pulse. Who would have thought that the sixth prince would still carry him by the hand, muttering, "Too much," not letting anyone sleep. The sixth prince recovered. The emperor happily said, "Good, the celestial maiden is truly a fairy descending to earth, with the ability to revive." The national teacher opened his mouth in amazement. He forced a smile, finding an opportunity to ask me how I could help. "Father, you are so good, how did you do it?" At 50 years old, my father was like a magician, making the boys who used to bully me at the village turn red. Difficulty breathing, then normal again. After being beaten up, those boys were scared of me. My father took me to the flower garden and told me that there were many wonderful things in the world. For example, a small patch of green grass, when mixed with medicinal herbs, will produce substances that cause redness and swelling. But all things are mutually dependent, and within 7 steps there is an antidote. He pointed to a clump of orchids nearby, and that orchid scent could cure this symptom. The scented bag I gave him was not the hastily drawn talisman, but the antidote grass powder mixed inside. That day she took the 6th prince to a place where a perfume shop had just opened, and the front door was filled with blooming flowers. As for my room, it was filled with the scent of orchids. The imperial physician could cure all kinds of difficult illnesses, but they had definitely never heard of folk remedies. The emperor rewarded me with 1,000 taels of gold in front of everyone, his words full of respect. I accepted the reward and calmly said, if someone hadn't taken a wet towel to cover the 6th prince's nose and mouth, moistening his nose to stall for time, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Immediately, everyone started whispering. The emperor nodded. Who did it? No one stood up. Su Qi slightly frowned, unconsciously looking at Qin Lu hiding behind the crowd. She wanted to take the blame. Qin Lu suddenly knelt down, pretending to be scared and kowtowed. Your Majesty, forgive me. This little girl is just a commoner. Before I heard the elders in the house say there was a way to save you, I offended your highness. The emperor waved his hand to tell her to stand up. It seems you are also lucky, accidentally saving my son. Someone reward 100 taels of gold. Qin Lu knelt down to thank him. Her gestures were dignified, her figure was languid. The king of Chang beside her kept staring at Qin Lu. His gaze was sticky. Everyone understood. After the reward, it was time to punish her. Su Ji was smart, and without waiting for the emperor to ask, she knelt down. The emperor, out of respect for his younger brother, became a king, and only lightly blamed her for not taking good care of the prince, and ordered her to return to the palace for half a month of confinement to think. When the outsiders left, Su Qi stopped pretending. She fiercely grabbed Tan Liu's wrist. You despicable person, who gave you permission to act so arrogantly? After saying that, she slapped Tan Liu. Qin Lu staggered and fell into the arms of the king. Before Qin Lu could say anything, tears started to flow. Su Ji intended to order Xian Dao to teach her a lesson, but he remembered that his confidant who had followed him for more than 10 years had been beaten to death. Su Ji intended to attack himself. Qin Lu was so weak that she broke down. That was enough. The king of Chang raised his eyebrows and shouted. The dignified princess was acting like a woman helping out. It seemed she needed to rest. After saying that, he carried concubine Lu and left. Su Ji clenched his fists. His anger was so intense that he looked at the king of Cheng's back. His expression filled with resentment and indignation. I followed her gaze and asked deeply, Princess, may I ask, is the prince a womanizer? Su Ji was stunned, his brows furrowed as if he was remembering something, revealing a look of disgust. They were powerful, and had no shortage of women. But I heard that the prince had only one princess in his life, and had never been a womanizer. This princess, you can do it too. Hua Qi looked at me in surprise. Hua Qi was grounded. A few days later was the once in 3 years royal hunt. King Tan used Hua Qi's grounding as an excuse, telling her to stay home and calm down, and secretly brought Tan Lu along. It was said that Hua Qi was so angry that she smashed up the entire room. I arrived at the royal palace and heard her scolding the royal family. What is that lowly maid wearing so much makeup for? Who does she want to seduce? Someone show her face to me. The royal family stared at the 15-year-old girl, tears streaming down her face as she kowtowed and begged. Princess, you are a fox. I walked over and whispered in her ear, if you commit the sin of killing now, the future crown prince's blessings will be reduced. Su Ji heard this and quickly stopped the servants, sending an order saying, Consider yourself lucky, where are you, chase me out. The other princes' wives all went to attend the royal hunting party. Su Ji had been confined for the past few days and couldn't go out, and no one had come to visit, so he was bored. I often go to chat with her. I just need to add a few sentences, then say some nice words that she will definitely have many children in the future, and promise that she will consider me a good friend. Flick your clothes. Look, I have already renovated the palace according to the blueprint you gave me. The moon-gazing tower over there is still being repaired, waiting for the prince to return from the hunting ground. It should be finished. Is it really possible to make the prince calm down from now on like you said? The drawing I gave her, she must have found a good craftsman and a feng shui master to look over all the easy fixes she made. Now she completely trusts me. I nodded. The previous prince had so many extravagant affairs. It was because the previous layout of the palace only focused on wealth and wealth gathering, neglecting family reunions. No wonder. I will tell those craftsmen to speed up. While the palace was being renovated, some news came from the hunting grounds. King Tan was interested in Tan Lu every day, treating her and flattering her very well. Even when attending the emperor's banquet, he brought her along, because she was also considered the life-saving benefactor of the sixth prince. The emperor specially allowed her to sit next to King Tan. All around were princes and nobles bringing their wives. The two of them sat in the middle of the crowd, looking like a loving couple. Suji was so angry that she threw the food on the table and laughed coldly, seeking death. Even if I said that Qin Lu could change the fate of her descendants, Suji would still kill her. There might still be children in the future, but if Qin Lu continues to act like this, she might really lose her footing. Suji went to find the assassin she had raised. I looked at that familiar face. That year he was the one who had beheaded my father. Hatred made my hands tremble non-stop. The strange assassin looked at me. I looked back, then smiled. I see your appearance. You are a blessed person. He was stunned, then happily said, borrowing the good words of the goddess. I smiled and said nothing. He probably didn't know that the person I said was blessed had already been thrown into the graveyard. Suji thought that Qin Lu would be easier to attack if she was outside. As long as she was cleaned up, she wouldn't be found. But she waited for 3 days, but did not receive any news from the assassin. Could it be that they had failed? But even if they had failed, they still had to return to report the news. Suji was sad and worried, and was about to send someone to investigate when the palace's imperial guards arrived and surrounded the entire palace. The leader saw Hua Qi and immediately waved his hand, shouted loudly, and grabbed her. Hua Qi was so scared that she was stunned, seeing them dare to touch her. She was angry and rude. I am the princess. How dare you touch me? What crime have I committed that you dare arrest me? I want to report to the emperor. The leader sneered. Your Majesty, the princess sent assassins to shoot arrows at your Majesty. He was still unconscious. How could the princess have the face to report to him? Suji's face was as pale as a sheet of paper. She kept mumbling, impossible. How could they shoot us, Your Majesty? She quickly calmed down and denied it. No, I didn't know anything. Even if there were assassins, it had nothing to do with me. I was wronged. No matter how she cried out for justice, the soldiers still obeyed the order to escort her away. The emperor was assassinated and fell into a coma. This matter involved the king and the queen, and the entire court was shocked. The news got out, and the people of the capital were talking excitedly about the recent unusual events. Even my familiar tea house was noticeably less crowded. The tea of the capital was indeed well deserved, and it had been a long time since I had the chance to enjoy it. The man opposite was wearing a white shirt, nearly 30 years old but still had the air of a young man. He leaned against the railing, his eyes filled with nostalgia. The tea you are drinking is the most expensive here. Remember to pay later. The man looked at him. He was a great bandit of the Jianghu. People in the world called him Jiang Nai. No one knew his real name. Years ago, after he took me away from the capital, I saw his evil tricks, and repeatedly asked to be his disciple. The assassins that Hua sent were originally only planning to kill Qin Lu, but Jiang Nai used magic to make them mistake the emperor for Qin Lu. Just when the assassin made his move, he used a rock to hit the tip of the sword, avoiding fatal injuries to the emperor. Only then could the act continue. That assassin definitely had a family member in his possession who had promised something. Even if he died, he would not reveal the promise. Jiang Nai scratched his head. What should he do now? His family, weren't they all killed by the promise? I took out a box. Inside was a fox and a few children's toys covered in blood. Jiang Nai frowned and looked at it for a long time. He was really dead. I miss you. That doesn't matter. What matters is whether he believes it or not. After Jiang Ye disguised himself and went to the dungeon, his target from the beginning was the emperor. Suji was extremely panicked after hearing this. She cried miserably and kept calling for peace. But the assassin had already confessed in detail every murder he had ever committed under Suji's orders. even exposing the hiding place of the royal palace's silver. The evidence was clear. Su Qi did not even have the chance to meet the emperor, to be honest. During the 3-4 trial, Su Qi was dragged up in a haggard state. Before she could even open her mouth, the king pointed at her face and scolded her as a cruel woman. "How dare you assassinate the emperor?" The king came out. Su Qi knelt down, clutched the king's robe and cried, "I really didn't do it." The king of Cheng mercilessly kicked her away. Hua Qi looked at the king of Cheng in disbelief. The man she loved all her life, who would do anything for him, now looked at her like she was a disgusting nuisance. "Who am I doing all this for? Who am I doing all this for?" Hua Qi still wanted to cry out for peace because the agent was sitting in the court, gritting his teeth and yelling at the person who dared to make noise in the court. "Where is the person? Shut up." Even if she was a criminal, she had not been convicted yet and was still a princess. How dare he? Hua Qi angrily turned her head to scold, but when she met the agent's eyes, she suddenly stiffened. She remembered. 4 years ago, the king fell in love with a young lady of an official at a poetry party. He picked up the handkerchief that the lady had dropped, held it carefully, and intended to ask the emperor to grant her a marriage. She knew about it and was a little angry when she found out that the girl's father was just a small 6th-rank official at the temple. She immediately ordered someone to pretend to be a hooligan, and had a duel with the girl on the way to the temple. She originally intended to ruin her reputation, but unexpectedly the girl had such a strong temper that she committed suicide when she got home. This matter could not be traced back to her. She did not care. But now the assassin in prison had confessed everything. Hua Qi did not expect that the 6th-rank official from the past, thanks to solving the Lai Kai case, was now the head of the agency. Hua Qi's face was pale as if it had been burned. She was held tightly on both sides, unable to bear one slap after another. It hurt so much. She had slapped someone before. Why didn't she think it would hurt like this? Hua Ji cried miserably, begging for her life, suddenly remembering her father. The king of Cheng was afraid of being implicated at this moment, so he quickly cut off all ties with her. But her father had always treated her like a precious gem in his hand, and had pampered her since she was young. Her father was currently holding the position of Minister of Revenue, so perhaps there would be a way to save her. A glimmer of hope flashed in Suji's eyes. Her mouth was beaten and swollen, covered in blood. Her speech became incoherent. "I want to see my father." The imperial censor snorted coldly. "You killed the emperor. Do you think your father can escape punishment? He stated in the article that it was all your idea. He knew nothing and even wrote this." He threw a piece of paper on the ground. Suji quickly crawled over to pick it up. It turned out to be a document severing ties written by her father himself. Suji was stunned, her mouth mumbling non-stop, unable to believe it. After the emperor woke up, Suji's crime of treason was officially sentenced. Prince Cheng was the emperor's blood brother after all, yet he cried and told lies, saying that he had been completely deceived and had no idea what Suji had done. The emperor scolded him for being stupid and ordered him to return to his palace to close the door and reflect. But did the emperor really believe that Prince Cheng had nothing to do with this? There was definitely still some doubt, and that was enough. What I need to do is amplify that suspicion, let it grow and sprout, become a thorn in the eye, a pest in the heart. Hua Qi was sentenced to hang. Before the execution, I went to see her once. Money can indeed buy immortality. I only needed a gold bar to bribe the jailers to let me in. Hua Ji, the noble and splendid princess of a few days ago, now looked as if she had lost 10 years of her age overnight. She was haggard and withered, sitting dazedly beside a pile of hay. Suddenly, 2 mice ran past her feet. Hua Ji screamed, eyes wide, desperately retreating into the corner. Stop here, go away, stay away from me. I am the princess." She raised her head and saw me, as if she had grabbed a life-saving straw. "Goddess, you have great supernatural powers. You can bring the dead back to life, change fate. Please save me." She knelt down before the bars, grabbing the hem of my skirt with her hands. "I will give you anything you want. Please save me." I looked at her from above. "Sit down, I give her a pill. Princess has suffered. This pill can ease people's pain." The wall collapsed, everyone was deep. After Suji was sentenced, those who had been harmed by her used all means to torture her in the section. She could die, but not so easily. Suji's eyes were cracked and his back was heavy. He stretched out his clawless hand to receive the medicine and swallowed it. Princess, you have done too many evil deeds. Do you really remember everything? Huaqi startled and looked up at me. What do you mean? I smiled sadly. The assassin confessed many things, but the fact that Qin Lu's sister and I were framed was not one of them. They thought that killing two commoners like us was not worth worrying about. 8 years ago, my father accepted money from the person who brought flowers to the Chengwang mansion just because the Chengwang rewarded him with cakes that the person made for him. You immediately ordered someone to kill my whole family. Do you still remember? Suji's eyes were initially evil, but now it was all because of your schemes. Qin Lu, wearing a robe, stood behind me, took off his hat and coldly looked at her. The noble princess must have forgotten about the naked Empress Dowager, who died on the street 2 years ago. Huaqi looked at Tan Liu's face that somewhat resembled her sister's, then looked at me and understood everything. You guys are my accomplices, you despicable commoners who harmed me. She screamed madly, using all her strength to grab me. I easily grabbed her wrist. The person lying down looked into her eyes. I sneered. It was useless. Huaqi, you are about to die. When you get to hell, there are many people waiting for you. They have waited for you for so long. They will definitely be happy to meet you. Huaqi gradually fell into despair. She screamed outside. Where are you? I was wronged. After saying half of her sentence, she was already unable to utter another word. I smiled. This pill is my farewell gift to you. Do you like it? Suji clutched her throat. Her eyes were in utter panic. She couldn't even make a sound to cry. She would never have the chance to tell the truth again. A death row inmate with countless enemies, suddenly becoming mute, a normal thing. Moreover, there are countless people who want to torture her. No one can expect me. So next, it was the king's turn. Even though Huaqi was extremely cruel, was the king innocent? He was a flirt, a playboy, and treated human lives like trash. How could someone like him live in peace? Since the assassination incident, the emperor had been having nightmares. Every night he woke up with a start, and for several days he was exhausted. Because he was haunted by psychological trauma, the imperial physician could only prescribe sedatives. There was no other way. So the emperor agreed to let me interpret his dreams. What did your majesty dream about? It was a thick fog. I couldn't see anything. There seemed to be something behind him, like a sword. Was it a sword? Seemed like. Was there anything else? Who was standing behind him? I couldn't see anything. Actually, His Majesty's dreams were very vague. I only intentionally guided him. I planted in his heart the thought that he had dreamed that a sword had stabbed him in the heart from behind, and the person who could do that could only be the person he trusted the most. His Majesty is a true dragon. The dream he saw was not a normal omen, but a warning. The Emperor frowned. What do you mean? That dream might come true. The Emperor's eyes widened. This means someone wants to rebel. But anyway, it was just a dream. It couldn't mean anything. Soon it was the Mid-Autumn Festival, and the Emperor, like every year, took the civil and military officials to the Mandarin's Tower to admire the moon. This year's moon was especially round and bright, illuminating every street in the capital. Originally, the Emperor was very happy when he heard the minister's beautiful words about the prosperity of the imperial court. He was about to return to the palace when he glanced into the distance and his pupils suddenly contracted. Whose mansion was that? He suddenly pointed to the south, and everyone looked in confusion. They only saw a mansion that covered a large area and was extremely luxurious, but its layout viewed from above was like a sharp sword, the tip of the sword pointing straight at the imperial palace. I spoke in the crowd. Your Majesty, that seems to be the residence of the city king. City king. The Emperor's expression was complicated. He frowned slightly and looked in that direction and asked, "Where is the city king?" The ministers looked at each other, until someone who knew the situation came forward to report that the city king rarely went up to the Star Tower every year. It seemed like he was out painting. The Emperor coldly snorted. Mid-Autumn Festival was originally a day of reunion. If he didn't want to come see then would personally come find this place. The ministers did not understand why the Emperor suddenly wanted to go find the king. But the words of the Emperor, even if it was a tiger's den or a wolf's mouth, had to be followed. So a group of people hurriedly changed into casual clothes and left the official tower. At this time, the king was sitting on the bow of the boat. The boat had reached the shore, but he still refused to go ashore. He lifted Qinlu's zither. His eyes were infatuated, no longer so sure. The prince had no one to restrain him. He was truly free and comfortable. Qinlu fed him another cup of wine. Then she leaned against his chest and said softly, Qinlu only wished to be by the prince's side. Beauty, from the first time I met her I felt so familiar, as if we had met before. Surely in our previous life we were a pair of immortals. This life we can meet again, rekindle our old fate. Qinlu sneered at the king, feeling that she was familiar only because she bore 5 parts resemblance to his deceased elder sister. He had absolutely no memory of the innocent girl who had died tragically. How damned. Don't worry, I will definitely make you a concubine. But as a commoner, how can I dare to dream of the noble position of concubine? The king laughed at the concubine, but no one dared to say a word. The prince was so good to Lure that Lure was extremely grateful, but she did not want to make things difficult for the prince. His Majesty would definitely choose a noble young lady to be his main wife. How could he let this concubine enter the palace first? Qinlu's words of patience and resentment made the prince extremely heartbroken. He frowned, dissatisfiedly saying that the little girl Huati was forced by him to marry her. And in the end, he killed her. Does he, the emperor, have the right to control my life? Beauty, you don't know that back when the emperor was still alive, I was the son he loved the most. When the late emperor passed away, my brothers and I were all training outside. Only the emperor was in the capital. Who knows if that will of the throne transfer is true or false? At that time, if I were determined to clarify right from wrong, it would not be certain that the person sitting on the throne would be him. It would not be wrong for the world to say that I gave the throne to him. What a mess! A loud shout woke up half of the king. The emperor had been standing on the shore all this time, his eyes bloodshot, angry to the point of his heart pounding. It turned out that this was what the good land had been thinking all along. The king was so scared that he peed his pants. He pushed Tanlu aside and hugged the emperor's leg. Imperial brother. I was drunk. I said something wrong. It was all drunken nonsense. The emperor sneered. Perhaps the wine was making him speak the truth. That was already strange, a foolish woman like him. How could she dare to assassinate? It seemed like he was being taken advantage of. The king still wanted to watch, but seeing the ministers following behind, everyone had heard his treacherous words. He knew everything was over. The emperor waved his sleeves, angrily leaving. Only then did the king suddenly remember something, turned his head to look back. Qinlu had already disappeared for 3 breaths. When he was escorted away by the imperial guards, he still couldn't understand how things had turned out like this. A few months ago, he was still a high-ranking royal. How could he now be in such a state of ruin? Actually, if he wanted to take revenge, he wouldn't need to spend so much effort. With Zhang Nai's abilities, I can easily sneak into the royal palace and poison them all. But I don't want them to die so easily, or even die in a noble manner and be buried with great honor after death. I want them to lose their reputations and be scorned by the world. He wanted all the crimes they committed to be exposed to the light, so that the world could see their corrupt faces hidden behind their flashy appearances. The emperor did not want to kill his own brother to avoid a bad reputation, so he decided to exile the king to the border. From the capital to the Shu Palace, he had to wear chains and was not allowed to rest. The king of Cheng would definitely die of exhaustion on the way. But this death was still too easy for him. Tanlu watched the back of the king leave the capital, his eyes filled with hatred. I want to personally repay this grudge. I will use Zhang Nai to help her. 5 days later, Jiangya returned alone. He came to the tea house to find me, saying that Qinlu had taken revenge and did not want to return to the capital. Qinlu left me a letter, knowing that Su Ti it was about to snow. Mui wanted to take Tai Tai to a warm place. Tai was very afraid of streams. Tai once told Mui after taking revenge, don't let yourself drown in hatred anymore. I listened to Tai. Tai taught me how to sew. Although my skills were not as good as Tai's, they were enough to support myself. If Tai in heaven sees that Mui is living well, he will surely be pleased. I will say goodbye here, the world is so big, I hope we will meet again one day. To Tai Tai I have thanked Tai. Teeth chewing in my ear, chattering non-stop. Disciple, do you know how that girl took revenge? Seeing that I wasn't paying attention, he continued on his own. She gave that bastard aphrodisiac, then locked him up with several sows and starved him for many days. When the drug took effect, he was in unbearable pain. He could only have sex with those pigs, and in the end was torn apart by them. After saying that, he shook his head repeatedly. Really, I continued, I'm too patient. That's right, what crime did a pig do? Teeth chewed and laughed. In terms of cruelty, you are still the best. He asked after Tanlu got her revenge. She had no more worries. And you, I guess you don't want to stay here either. The money you earned in the past time is enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Do you want to leave? Master will help you come up with a plan to fake your death. I looked straight into his eyes and asked back, what about your son? He paused for a moment. Master didn't plan to leave the capital from the beginning, right? Now you want me to go in such a hurry? Afraid that I will ruin Master's revenge plan. He chewed his teeth silently, and his usual mocking expression was gone. He looked at me, his eyes were thoughtful. What do you know? When I interpreted dreams for the emperor, he said he often dreamed of a good friend who had died many years ago coming back to take his life. Then I looked it up. 10 years ago, he used the crime of treason to kill the entire family of his close friend, the National Protector General. That general's family name was Rang. His youngest son was named Rang and Noyet. At that time he had disappeared without a trace. I leisurely poured more tea for Rang to chew. Master, this is a difficult task. Do you need help? I am a celestial maiden, very formidable. There was no need for much in return. Just treat me to a cup of the most expensive tea on this floor. He stared at me silently for a few seconds, then suddenly lowered his head and chuckled, then burst out laughing. The passers-by below all looked up at him in confusion.